The history of wrestling was written long before the lights, the pyro, and the billion-dollar arenas. It began in smoke-filled halls where the crowd believed every punch and every fall. There was no music, no pageantry, just a man and the mat. And for nearly a decade, that man was Bruno Sammartino. He held the belt with steel in his spine and silence in his throat, drawing blood and fans in equal measure. When he passed the torch, it flickered. The next era wandered until Vince McMahon saw the future in color and chose to paint it red and yellow. Hulk Hogan's rise put wrestling on the map of mainstream America. With every leg drop, a new market opened. With each flex, another kid begged for tickets. He brought wrestling to Saturday mornings and sold it like salvation. Around his waist, the championship belt became a weapon of mass marketing. Hogan became the face of a global empire, one where morality tales were told through body slams, and children chanted because they believed in his prayers and vitamins like they were gospel. But even empires decay. By the early 90s, the magic cracked. Hogan left. The muscle-bound gods faded into scandal and self-parody. WWE was a ship without a captain. In his absence, Bret Hart wore the crown with honor, fighting each match like it was a clinic in pride and pain. He had precision, a warrior of respect. But his joker to the Batman was Shawn Michaels. He spun arrogance into art and sold chaos with every super kick. Yet neither man could lift the business like giants had. Their brilliance wasn't enough to light the mainstream. WWE had wrestlers, but it didn't have a global superstar. And that's when the war began. WCW rose from the grave with Ted Turner's fortune and Vince's old toys. Ric Flair came home to Southern Gold. Hulk Hogan crossed enemy lines. And when he turned to the dark side, in 1996, the world shifted. The NWO was born in a cloud of spray paint and betrayal. For 83 straight weeks, WCW ruled the ratings. Nitro was must-see. Legends jumped ship. The future wore black and white. Meanwhile, ECW bled on the fringe. Philly's underground beast, tearing through tables and censorship, fed the hardcore faithful with barbed wire dreams and a microphone that screamed truth. WWE was dying, and everyone knew it. And then a bald, broken man flipped his middle finger and shattered the glass. Steve Austin didn't come to play games. He came to kill the script. He didn't follow any moral compass. No red and yellow. Just beer, violence, and hatred so pure it became art. He didn't cut promos. He summoned riots. He didn't fight henchmen. He assaulted the boss. When Austin waged war against Vince McMahon, it became a fight for every common man. And every punch he threw into that suit wasn't for a storyline. It was for every man who ever clocked in for less than he was worth. He brought an attitude that dragged the business to heights it had never seen before. And Austin became the heartbeat. Every Raw opened with glass. Every crowd rose like a war cry. He brought a rage that everyone recognized. He made rebellion sacred. He made Middle America scream, Austin 316, like it was their last line of defense. Merchandise flew. Ratings shattered. WCW blinked. ECW collapsed under the weight of its own brilliance. WWE ran through the competition. Austin didn't chase the torch. He melted it down and used it as a brand. But even fire extinguishes someday. Injuries piled up, walkouts, creative wars. Austin couldn't sustain what he built. His body gave out. His fury cracked. His last match came not with a triumph, but a quiet nod to The Rock, the only other icon who could match his weight. And when the curtain fell on Austin, the crowd didn't cheer. They stared into the void he left behind. Because without Austin, there was no Attitude Era. The lights were still bright, the stage was still grand, but the center was missing. The Rock followed him, but only for a moment. His charm, his charisma, his lightning in a bottle electrified the world, but his heart belonged to Hollywood. Brock Lesnar arrived like a storm, tearing through giants and lifting the title to great heights. But he didn't want the fame. He didn't want the schedule, and soon, he didn't want the business. Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Triple H, even Shawn Michaels reborn. Legends, technical geniuses, craftsmen, icons. But none of them were built to carry it. They could headline, steal shows, break hearts, but they weren't the ones the world looked to when it asked, who runs this place? Vince tried to force it. He pushed, he prodded, he experimented. But the magic that made Austin wasn't a formula. It was lightning. And WWE didn't know where the next strike would come from. Raw and SmackDown delivered weekly classics. But the company had lost the face of its soul. The fans came. The pay-per-views sold. But the crown? It sat untouched. Vince McMahon kept shouting into the void, demanding ruthless aggression, until someone stepped up and showed what it really meant.
Ruthless aggression.
When the smoke cleared from the Attitude Era, the ring echoed with silence. Austin was gone. The Rock vanished into red carpets. Brock Lesnar exploded, then walked away. Wrestlers came and went. Titles changed hands. But there was no heartbeat in the middle of it. The crown sat heavy. No one dared to touch it. Vince McMahon stood in the ruins of a war he'd already won, staring at a roster full of legends without a leader. WrestleMania still filled stadiums. Raw still roared. But there was no one to put on the posters. No one to sit at the top of the mountain. They had champions, but no icon. They had moments, but no myth. Then a rookie walked through the curtain in 2002 and slapped Kurt Angle across the face with ruthless aggression. He had a buzz cut, boots, and the hunger of a man with something to prove. The debut was promising, but the edge wasn't there. Too bland, too clean. And this business doesn't forgive mediocrity. The door was already starting to close. Then the bars dropped. The word life gimmick revived him. Cena found rhythm in rebellion. Promos became punchlines. Entrances became concerts. He talked his way up the ladder. White wristbands, throwback jerseys, a spinning US title. He made swagger corporate. And the crowd. They ate it up. By 2005, the decision was made. He beat JBL at WrestleMania. Got a custom belt that spun like a warning sign. WWE wrapped the empire around his waist. Pay-per-views. Make-A-Wish. ESPN. He went from developmental prospect to digital icon. The kids called him a hero. He wasn't the first choice for the crown, but his rise made him the only choice. But the boos came too. Before the backlash. Before the 5 moves of doom memes. Before the internet made him a target, he did what no one else could. He carried the company through hell. WWE wasn't cool anymore. The Attitude fans had grown up. The new crowd chanted, "Let's go Cena." And just as loud, "Cena sucks." And that was the trick. Love or hate, the noise never stopped. Cena was the show. Then came the PG era. No blood, no chair shots to the skull, tongues censored. But Cena never flinched. He main evented everything. Never took breaks, never pulled out. When he tore his pec in 2007 and returned in 4 months, even his haters stood up. Business dipped, segments failed, stars fizzled. Cena stayed. Every handshake, every autograph, every wish. WrestleMania 22, he beat Triple H in a hostile crowd. He tapped out Shawn Michaels. Every feud, every poster, every title match, he was the anchor. Not the flashiest, not the most loved, but the most reliable. Raw was his house. The house shows were his grind. He outlasted Batista, outworked Edge, survived Orton's chaos. The company gave him the ball, and he never dropped it. He wasn't Austin. He wasn't Rock. He didn't try to be. Cena knew his limits and worked around them. And while others stumbled, he kept the machine alive. But machines rust. The cheers quieted. The boos got smarter. Arenas split in half. The chant became the soundtrack. He smiled. He leaned into it. But the air had changed. They called him corporate, safe, manufactured. He stopped being the people's champ and became the company firewall. The suffocation came slow. Nexus rose. Cena ended it. Ray won the title. Cena took it that night. Rusev stormed in. Cena beat him waving the US flag. Alex Riley vanished. Bray Wyatt lit a fire. Cena crushed it with a choir. His shovel was made of gold, and it buried without bias. The promos told the truth better than the booking ever could. CM Punk called him an ass kisser. The Rock tore through him live, turning his slogans into punchlines. Cena fired back, but the truth wasn't in the words. It was in the crowd. He wasn't the hero anymore. He was the obstacle. He still sold the most shirts, still showed up early, stayed late, crushed the big matches. But something cracked. Not because he got worse, but because he never evolved. Same entrance, same catchphrases, same 5 moves. Win, repeat. They called it the 5 moves of doom. They chanted, "You can't wrestle," even when he was delivered classics with Punk, Bryan, Styles. Because it wasn't about talent, it was about space, and he took all of it. He didn't need the title, got it anyway. Didn't need to headline, did it anyway. New stars rose, until they hit the ceiling. And that ceiling wore jorts and saluted invisible troops. Zack Ryder got over. Cena made him a joke. Wade Barrett had a movement. Cena snuffed it out. Damian Sandow cashed in. Cena kicked out. The business was built around him. And no matter how loud the pop or how fresh the momentum, Cena stood in the doorway. He made WWE billions, but every dollar came at a cost. A generation of wrestlers came up in his shadow and suffocated beneath it. By 2016, the business moved forward. NXT bled into the main roster. The new blood rose. And Cena, he stepped back. Because he knew it was time. The kids still wore his merch. He still granted the wishes, still signed every poster. The respect returned. The boos faded because they understood. He wasn't perfect, but he was essential. The man who made millions cheer and millions boo, for the same reason. Because love him or hate him, you had to see him. And somewhere in that ring, as the lights dimmed and the noise softened, the company started looking again. For someone who could carry the weight. For someone who could make the ring matter again. For someone who could hold the company's shield.
Acknowledge me!
He was built for this, bred for it, born into a bloodline that stretched across generations, titles, and tombstones. While others clawed their way up from bingo halls and broken bones, he walked through the door with gold in his veins and legacy on his shoulders. He was supposed to be the one, the heir. The crown was waiting. But when Roman Reigns stood in that ring and reached for the torch, the crowd spit fire at him. In another era, he would have been untouchable. The look, the size, the aura, the pedigree, a jawline carved from stone, a frame like a Greek god, a Superman punch that cracked ribs on impact. Vince saw it early. The Office saw it clearly. From his Shield debut, the signs were flashing. This one's different. But when they broke the Shield, they broke the illusion too. Royal Rumble, Philadelphia. They gave him the win. They gave him the Rock. They gave him the coronation. But the people gave him hell. Roman Reigns stood at the top of the mountain, and when he looked down, there were no cheers, just boos. So loud they swallowed the broadcast, so sharp they pierced the commentary. It didn't matter that he looked like a world champion or bled Samoan royalty. The crowd saw through the formula. They saw the machine grinding again. They saw John Cena with a new haircut and fewer words, and they turned on him like a virus. From WrestleMania 31 to 34, he main evented 4 straight shows, and each one sounded like a protest. He was booed out of buildings, mocked, dragged, dissected, just for existing at the top. The rejection was personal. It could have broke the toughest, but he kept showing up. Same glare, same lines, same press, same grind. He wore a crown he hadn't earned in an empire that didn't want him, and everything wrong with WWE got stapled to his name. So the fire only got hotter. He walked through it anyway, until the fire changed him. In 2020, the world shut down. The lights went out. The arenas emptied. Roman Reigns disappeared. When he returned, there was just silence. Heavy, haunting silence. He didn't come back for redemption. He came back to take everything. No vest, no smile, no catchphrases, just Paul Heyman by his side, a title on his shoulder, and a look in his eyes that demanded recognition. The big dog was dead. The tribal chief had arrived, and the crowd didn't boo. They didn't cheer. They raised their hands. This wasn't a babyface anymore. This was a general. He walked with cadence, spoke with weight. His words dripped with finality. His matches tore down roofs. He turned blood into obedience. The Usos bent the knee. Discounted Umaga stalked ringside like a silent executioner. Paul Heyman whispered gospel while Roman rewrote scripture. He turned fear into currency. For over 1,000 days, he held the title hostage with slow-burning, soul-breaking control. Every challenger walked in with fire. They all left in smoke. Edge, Daniel Bryan, Cena, Owens, Sammy, Cody. One by one, they fell. These weren't matches. They were sermons. He talked mid-fight, explained his dominance, broke men with his voice before his fists, turned submission holds into guillotine. And the crowd, they watched. The boos softened. The whispers turned to awe. Somewhere deep into his reign, something shifted. The same crowd that once buried him stood up. They started to acknowledge him. Roman Reigns became the center of the WWE universe. Every star shone brighter in his orbit. Every belt meant less than his. Every match felt smaller than his entrance. They said he was overprotected, overbooked, shielded by creative. But the truth was simpler. He forced the world to understand. You don't have to love the king. You just have to kneel. And in that kneel, they found something they hadn't felt since Austin, since Hogan, since Bruno. Dominance, not hype, not rebellion. Pure, unrelenting control. Roman didn't chase the fans. He waited for them to follow, and they did. Not all at once, but slowly, silently. The booze thinned, the signs changed. Acknowledge Me shirts filled the stands. The same kids who once chanted, "You can't wrestle," now threw up ones when his music hit. By the time Cody Rhodes stood across from him at WrestleMania 39, the war wasn't hero versus villain. It was fate versus defiance. Roman stood there, 900 days deep, title glowing like a crown forged in grief. And when he beat Cody, it felt like someone ripped the final page from a fairy tale. And when the smoke cleared again, when the chants faded, the tears dried, and the stories ended, the throne wasn't empty. It was occupied by the only man left standing, the man who never begged for love, the man who forced the world to acknowledge him. Roman sat on the throne, but his shadow stretched far beyond the title. It reached into locker rooms, into production meetings, into camera angles, and struck fear into every man who still believed he could lead. And yet, one man kept walking toward him, a man who was never destined for the crown, but stole it through defiance. A man who wore a suit stitched with his father's dream.
As I cannot physically put that title belt into my father's hands, I cannot bestow it upon the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, but I certainly can put it around the waist of the American Nightmare.
A man who left everything behind so he could come back and finish his story. The crown had burned every head that wore it, but the next man in line had already forged his legacy in fire. He was born into wrestling's legacy, but he was never the chosen one. He rose from the bottom, proved himself through the grind, and as a reward, they painted him gold. Stardust was the joke he wore like armor, a cartoon in a company that had already turned PG. He danced, he hissed, he lost in segments no one rewound. He gave it his all, but when the act cracked, when the smile faded, there was no redemption, just silence. So he walked out. He went to the Indies and carved his own path. The Rhodes name got him in the door, but nothing else. For the rest, he had to fight. He fought for his name. He fought for Dusty's ghost. He fought because no one else would. And in that fight, Cody became something WWE couldn't manufacture, real. When his name got too big for the Indies, he built his own empire. AEW wasn't just a company, it was a rebellion, a revolution, and Cody stood at the center of it, smashing thrones with a sledgehammer, daring the machine to take notice. But the fire he lit began to consume him, so he did the unthinkable. He walked away from the empire he helped build, and returned to the same machine that once discarded him, because he still had a story left to finish. WrestleMania 38. The lights dropped, Kingdom hit, and the crowd exploded. Cody didn't return as a mid-carder. He returned as a prodigal son, suited, centered, glowing like the child of a prophecy. WWE didn't just bring him back, they gave him the keys. And for once, the people agreed. He cut promos with tears in his voice and a crown in his heart. He faced Seth Rollins 3 times, finishing with a torn chest and a standing ovation. He walked back into hell and came out beloved. They cheered his name, they sang his theme, they carried signs that said, "Finish the story." But when the curtain closed on WrestleMania 39, Cody wasn't standing tall. He was broken in the ring, Roman's boot on his chest, his dream shattered mid-sentence. The story didn't end, it cracked. Still, the cheers didn't stop. He went to Raw the next night, and the fans stood with him. They always had. 1 year later, WrestleMania 40, Cody Rhodes stood across from a god in armor, and this time, he won. He held the undisputed WWE Championship above his head, and the crowd melted. Confetti rained like absolution. The story was finished. The tribal chief had fallen. The chase was over. Now came the rain, and the weight of the crown is not cinematic. It's suffocating. For years, Cody was the hunter, the fan favorite, the dreamer. Now, he's the standard, the man in the suit, the one they once loved because he wasn't on top. The cheers still come, but they feel different. He shakes hands backstage. He closes the shows. He gives everything. But the magic is flickering. The matches feel like filler. The promos sound recycled. The story feels thin. And in the shadows, they wait. Seth Rollins, reinvented. Roman Reigns, still looming. John Cena, with one last flame to burn. Because the story was never about finishing the dream. It's about surviving what happens after. When you take the crown, when you carry the legacy, when you wear your father's ghost-like armor, you don't just become champion, you become a target. Will Cody Rhodes surpass the one came before him? It's too early to say. Steve Austin sits atop every GOAT debate, not just for success, but for sparking a fire that's never been replicated. But those who followed left their own distinct marks. One walked in when the kingdom was burning and held up the walls with bare hands. Another was chosen, rejected, and returned with a sword instead of a smile. The last carved his name into stone with a chisel made of loss, and came back to finish a story he was never allowed to begin. They all held the throne. They all paid for it. Cena never wavered, but he was never fully loved. Roman made them kneel, but he left the throne cold. Cody was loved too deeply, and now that love is becoming weight. So the question remains, who was the man who carried WWE the best? Let us know in the comments below. Click on the screen to find out how Seth Rollins will change wrestling forever. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for weekly videos.